It was fun. How are you? You okay?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, thank you, and thanks for inviting me for an interview.
Well, I quite like the fact you got. Is that a mini Moog behind you?
It is, yeah, a mini Moog and a Voyager below. Yeah.
So your band, the Moog. How did that all start?
That started in '81, and it was just a bunch of friends that were hanging around together. So I knew the other members from a local record store. So we used to go down and kind of trawl through the kind of new releases during the week, and just got to know them. And I had a real compelling need to be in a band and to do something. I moved from Scotland. You can tell a bit of the Scottish accent is still there. But in '79, my parents moved from Scotland to York.
Right.
So there was a massive change in my life at 15 years old, kind of moving from all my friends and everything I'd grown up with at that point, and then coming to York. And there was so this kind of summer of '79 was a real significant kind of change year for me in terms of what I wanted to do and my thought process and stuff. And I'd always been interested in music at school, kind of like around about the kind of 14, 15 years old. I was interested in kind of hanging out in the kind of school music room, and some of the kind of the older lads were in bands and those sort of things were kind of happening. And there was a band that was made up from a couple of members from our school who signed to Fast Records in Edinburgh. And that was the first of me kind of seeing that kind of thing, how it could happen. And then kind of probably more significantly, round about the similar period, Gary Numan appeared, and that changed everything from then on. The first time I heard Our Friends Electric, it just, a light bulb went on, and then that was the kind of, it married up what I'd seen with music and what I knew I could do with music, and I knew I wanted to be in a band and the whole punk thing. And I was a kind of a very early adopter of going to see bands when I was kind of that kind of 14 years old, and I went to see the Ruts and the Skids, and the kind of scene was happening in Scotland at the time. So yeah, I got really kind of into it, but then when Gary Numan came along, this kind of seismic shift of difference, and I just knew then that life wouldn't be the same, and so coming to York, I actually reinvented myself. It was a chance to start anew, and I knew that I wanted to do electronic music. I wanted to play with synthesizers, and that was the kind of the calling of meeting up with Eric and John from what became the Mood. Yeah. There was a shared interest, that they were into Bowie and Roxy music because they were older than I was. I was the kind of baby of the band. But my kind of love of synthesizers, and after discovering Gary Numan, I got into OMD and Messages and Electricity, and you start to kind of just consume, don't you? That once you kind of realize that stuff's out there, you start buying everything there is, and I got into the kind of usual stuff of Kraftwerk, and then discovered Yellow Magic Orchestra, which was brilliant. And then, in bands like Telex and stuff like that, Space, and yeah, it goes on and on.
It was strange, because I know I like Jean-Michel Jarre and I like Bowie.
Yeah.
But when Numan came along, it was like the combination of the two.
Yeah.
Sort of see what I mean. For me, it worked really well. It was. But you never really got a major hit in the UK, did you?
No, we didn't. The highest was 42, when that was with Paris Is One Day Away. The previous single, Don't Stop, although it got to 56, I think it was, in the UK charts, it did very well in the clubs. Yeah. And it got remixed in the States, and it did really well in the States. So there was the Billboard dance charts back then, and I think it was number 6. It was in the Billboard dance charts. So it kind of created this kind of cult status of, so although we never crossed over into the kind of mainstream charts, it kind of created this kind of buzz about us and what was happening, and especially in kind of all the kind of clubs around New York and stuff like that was happening in the kind of that early 80s. We were kind of part of all that kind of thing that was happening. So yeah, so that was weird. And then some success in Europe. The single sold really well in Europe, in Portugal and Spain and France, and yeah.
Do you know what? I think I've still got it somewhere. I did buy a 12-inch version of one of your songs. I can't remember which one, and I can't find it, but it's there somewhere, because I loved there was a sort of roaring synth sound there somewhere.
Well, there was the one that the first single we did was "Is There a Reason,"
right?
And the 12-inch was probably the first 12-inch we did where it was kind of full of indulgence.
Right.
So back then we were recording at SARM East in London.
Right.
And SARM was run by Jill Sinclair and Trevor Horn, husband and wife team. So our producers at the time was a guy called Anthony Forrest, who was he never kind of made it big as a producer, but he was kind of around that kind of scene at the time, and he was a really very good producer. And he's the one that chose to go to SARM. And thankfully, it's a great choice, because our engineers were Gary Langan and Julian Middleton, who became very, very successful, and obviously Gary with Art of Noise and those sort of things. So when we did the 12-inch remix, there was this kind of overindulgence we had Simon Darlow on keyboards helping us out and things, and Trevor popping in, and so we had access to all these toys that they were buying. So I'm really kind of proud of what we achieved with that 12-inch mix, and maybe that's the one because the kind of breakdown and everything was really heavily driven with synths and arpeggiations and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I'll have to see if it's on YouTube or something like
Yeah, and that's the fascinating thing, isn't it, with YouTube and the internet? It really kind of brought the band back to life in essence, because there was a period where even I'd forgotten all about it. It was something that happened way in the past. And there was this kind of resurgence that was happening on the internet, and it just kept kind of building and building. And then got to the point in 2008 when Cherry Red got in touch and said that they had I think they do some kind of scoring system, and if enough people call up and enough people email them, then it makes commercial sense, and then they'll put something out. So they contacted us and said, we've had enough people contacting us and wanting to do something, and would you be interested in putting a singles collection together? So that came out in 2008, and that was a kind of probably the rebirth of the interest about the band. And now the YouTube is awash with all the different recordings out there in different formats, all the videos, and
it is good for that. If you suddenly think of something, I normally just have my Amazon Music, which is quite good actually, because if I say something like that, it'll probably come on. You know what I mean? Even that's got the category of everything, sort of. It's quite amazing. But then you split up in 84.
84, yeah, that's it. I suppose it maybe came to a logical conclusion. A lot of bands, and I've heard you say this before when you've been interviewing other people, there's that kind of thing where there's a kind of a 2-year window. You get the chance to do something in that window. And I suppose we came through that 2 years from 82, although we kind of got together in 81. We weren't really releasing singles until 82, and then 84 was the last single, which was Need Your Love Now. And we never had great initial management. We had 2 guys that managed us initially, and they did a very good job of getting us signed to RCA, and we had a real bidding war with most of the majors at the time. So they played their part very well there, but they didn't really kind of capitalize on some of the things we're doing. For example, we never went to the States.
No,
so it's absolutely crazy when you think back to it now. So we kind of parted our ways with them. It would have been kind of the 83, end of 83, and then we had been hanging out at the Warehouse Club in Leeds,
right,
which kind of became a legendary club, and it's where Mark Harmon, used to be the coat boy on the door, and there was a lot of things happening. So a lot of really cool music was coming in and out of that. And Mike Wine, that owned the club, he started managing other bands, and he was involved with Soft Cell in the early days, but more with Vicious Pink Phenomena, which were the backing singers for Soft Cell, and they did a management deal with him, and so he was doing that, and we were hanging out and getting to know them, and he became our manager in the end. And that was the kind of for the last single, and he tried to get us away from RCA because I think they kind of lost interest in us by then, and they didn't really promote the last single at all. And we tried to kind of leave RCA and join EMI. And in that transition period, it kind of all fell apart. It was just too long. We lost interest, and that was it. The end.
But then, did you not? Did you form another little band?
Yeah. So the last single we did was recorded at Rockfield in Wales, and the Paul Cobalt, the producer, and Ainsley, that owned Rockfield, they had a production company, and John, the singer from The Mood, and myself, we put a band together called Pleasure Company.
That's it, yeah.
And we went back to Rockfield and we recorded under a production deal, and they signed us into POW at the same time. In fact, Ronnie from Zapao plays guitar on the demos we did, and that's those sessions. They got out the doors first, and then it just snowballed with them, and we got kind of thrown by the wayside. We became the bridesmaid, not the bride.
Did that album? It didn't ever get released, did it?
Never got released. No.
So who's got it?
So I suppose legally, the production company will have them, but I have the recordings, I have the masters of them. So yeah.
I remember Gary Numan and James Freud done an album together, who's never ever released. This was at Gary's height, and I got hold of James, and he did actually send us the copy of the album,
right.
Which I think just about everyone's got nowadays, but it was never actually released, if you know what I mean. It's sort of, So I mean, it would be interesting to hear it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it definitely would. And in fact, there was quite a number of Mood recordings that were never released in the end.
Really?
Yeah, so we've got a whole bunch of stuff, because our last producer was Steve Levine.
Right.
And the majority of the Steve Levine sessions never got released. We Passion Dark Rooms was probably the only Steve Levine production that got put out. And then we did a mini LP in the States, and there was a couple of tracks on that. But the other ones have never been heard. And I still know Steve very well. We're good friends. And we keep saying that we must try and get the masters off of RCA, and actually just finish the album. It never got finished. Yeah,
it was good with that. I mean, because I think in our digital age, it's quite easy just to put it out there now, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
There's probably no money in it for you, but at least it'd be out there, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you don't do it for money anymore. That's not the point.
No.
So you kind of, which is all right, because you just do it for the love of it now, don't you? That's what it's about. That's kind of what drives it.
It's sort of turned itself on its head, hasn't it? Where you used to make money out of records, where now you don't make any money out of your music. You just tour and make your money. So it's sort of flipped right over, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is completely changed around, because back in the kind of 80s, I mean, the Mood weren't known for playing live. We did quite a few gigs in the early days, which got us signed, and then we did a few stuff just to promote the singles. We would do a tour for each single, but it was always kind of minimum, because I just loved being in the studio. That was that's where I was most happiest on it, and hence why I still to this day, I still do things. And after the Mood split, and we did the Pleasure Company, and then I then stayed in the industry, and I've kind of worked in studios and kind of learned my craft more. I became a record producer and songwriter. And so I stayed in the music industry for, gosh, a good 10 years after the Mood split up. Yeah. And then kind of left around about the mid-90s,
So where I mean, obviously you've still got all your stuff behind you and that. Are you still doing music or?
A little bit, yeah. The kind of the heart is there, but the kind of it's trying to find time.
Yeah.
It sounds bizarre, though, that especially with everything that's happening at the moment, and you kind of see a lot of musicians are kind of saying, great time to be in the studio and just write and do that stuff. But I do have a day job.
Yeah. Well,
a day job, which helps pay for all this stuff. That kind of has been all consuming, really. But yeah, my plan is that I will gather enough time to actually dedicate to doing stuff. And I have done a few things over the years. I had a duo called the Groove Twins, and we brought an EP out with a good friend of mine, Anton Witter. And Anton I've known for many years, and I used to produce him a long time ago in the kind of late 80s, and we've remained very close friends. So we kind of do stuff every now and again, and we've just finished finished the starting of a new project called Glitterball. And we've done a recording of that, and that's kind of out on SoundCloud at the moment, and it will go out onto it will come out as a kind of a single very shortly. So that's kind of something that we're doing. I've got something in the pipeline which has been about for a long time, is doing something with Wolfgang Fleur from Kraftwerk. And Wolfgang's a very good friend. So it's kind of fitting those sort of things in. So there's a lot of kind of projects on the on the back burner that needs kind of resurrecting.
It is hard. I mean, it's having, like you say, it's having the time when it's not actually a full-time job anymore to actually, because I know I was talking to Andy McCluskey once about trying to get him to come down and do something, him and Paul, and he said, well, no, I don't like that idea. He said, but if you can get Carl Bertos to come along, I'll come and do it. So I got hold of Carl Bertos, and he sort of said, yeah, okay. So I sort of got back to Andy, but obviously they're like 2 years in front of themselves for everything. So it didn't happen in the end, but you never know, it might happen one day.
Yeah, exactly.
But it would be fantastic if you could get these other old recordings out there, wouldn't it?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And it's something. It will definitely happen. I haven't got a timeline for it, but it will definitely happen. And hopefully, kind of within the next 6 to 7 months, we'll try and get something together on it. As I say, I've been threatening with Steve Levine to try and do something. And once all this kind of madness that we're going through at the moment, when we come out the other end, hopefully we'll have time to put those things together.
It is. My daughter, she's 20 now. She went for a COVID test Friday, I think. No, Thursday actually. So you suddenly get this panic, like, well, if she, lucky enough, she didn't have it, but if she had got it, I'm suddenly at home for 14 days. So is my wife, and then my other sons wouldn't be able to visit, and you're then thinking about who you bumped into. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah. There is, and I think it's really sad that kind of live music has come to a halt, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight at the moment. It just seems to be kind of getting worse, and that is really sad. I mean, my youngest daughter, who's really into music, and she loves going to live concerts, and it's been quite good for me as well, kind of getting the chance, an excuse to go and see live bands over the past number of years. And she's actually, she's really into Gary Numan, and we've been to the kind of the last few Gary Numan shows, and we had tickets for the drive-in stuff, which never came to fruition in the end. That was really sad. So I think for her generation, it must have a real impact, because you know that the live music scene was so healthy before this kind of happened.
It's going to take a while to get it going again, if and when it gets going. I think, you know, I mean, because I had Dramatis booked with Cult with No Name as support. But then this was should have happened now, I think, roughly about that. But once this sort of kicked off, they were then starting to look at the bigger bands, which obviously would attract more people. So I got put out on the back burner because they were sort of bottlenecking everything towards the end of this year. Well, obviously that's not even happening. So who knows where it's going on?
Yeah, exactly. I think there'll be a period of reinvention happening, I'd expect, and there will be opportunities coming out of it, and people have to kind of look at things in a different way. So I have real faith that you know, good things will always happen and prevail out at the end of it. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad really, because you not only for the artists but everyone involved. And, you know, sometimes hundreds of people involved, isn't there? You know, and they're all out of work or. Yeah,
they are. Yeah, I mean, I've got good friends that kind of are in that side of it, working the production side, and are techs, and you know, and they you know, this time last year they had a whole diary booked in front of them, and you know, their life's mapped out for the next 2 years, and all of a sudden, bang, it's gone. You know? And that's it. That's really difficult for that side of the industry, where they rely on a wage, you know, much more than an artist who can, by the nature of what they do, be more creative and trying to find ways of income.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad for everyone, really, in a strange, well, in the right way, you know, especially the music, I think, and but it will happen again. Soon.
Yes, yeah, it completely will, and I think there's a real pent-up need, isn't there? So I think once the floodgates get opened, it's just going to go bang, and probably really exciting.
I hope so. But you've been quite busy appearing at these sort of electronic festival or chat things. I don't even know what you're doing, really. I mean, I know at Norwich where there was Wolfgang and in Cluskey, I think you were doing,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It was a really good event, that actually. That's where I met Wolfgang for the first time.
Right. Yeah. So did I.
Really hit it off, and he's such a lovely person, really genuinely lovely person, and he's become a good friend. So you know, when he comes over, we always try and get together at some point, and the gigs that he does, and we will ultimately get something going with it. So it's I think the whole kind of electronic scene industry, I think, is very small, and I'm always amazed at how everyone kind of knows everybody. But I'm amazed with that in the music industry anyway. That's something I've discovered, you know, over the 20, 30, or 40 years I've been doing this, how small it is. You know, it never ceases to amaze me how we're all connected in different ways. You know, absolutely crazy. But, I mean, you were talking to David Brooks the other day. That one. I've stayed in David's flat in London many years ago with TJ. So I met TJ Davis backstage at a Gary Numan concert many years ago. He came to play at York at the Barbican, and I was with Anton Witter, who I do stuff with. And after the gig, because I had my path had crossed with Gary a few times over the years. So I said, why don't we go backstage and I'll introduce you, because Anton's a massive Gary Numan fan. So off we went backstage, and kind of Gary had gone. You know, he wasn't there. So I ended up bumping into TJ and chatting to her, and we kind of became really good friends. And she sang on a number of production stuff I did over the years.
Oh, right.
And then I had an artist that I had produced and written for, who I got signed to Sony. So I had a production company, and I signed this artist to my production company, and we signed then to Sony Records. And I used TJ's floor, her flat in London, is my base when I was down there trying to, get the deals done and those sort of things on it. So I've known her for many, many, many years. So that's bizarre how they kind of, how close everyone is, together in different ways.
This is why I sort of changed my interview thing from just Numan stuff. And like I said, it's like 3 steps from Gary now.
Yeah.
Because somewhere along the line, like you say, with TJ, and then she's with Gary, and so there's always that sort of step, it's great. I mean the early 80s or late 70s, early 80s was full of synth songs, wasn't it? I mean, it sort of it'd gone from punk, where if you could play a guitar you got a record deal, to more or less if you had a synth you got a record deal. I mean, if you know what I mean. But there was some fantastic stuff coming.
But there was some amazing stuff out there. I mean, the list is endless in terms of what was happening. But there's some really cool obscure things out there as well that kind of been forgotten about. There was some great singles that came out in the kind of the early 80s. I think there was that golden period between kind of 1980 and probably 84 where it all stopped. And there was that kind of 4-year period where there was just single after single, band after band, and it was just sounding brilliant. And it was a great time to be involved. And for that, I'm kind of grateful that we kind of although we never crossed over into that kind of that real kind of longevity in that big kind of scene. We were around at probably the best time to be involved in the music industry. So I was very lucky enough to see and be on the kind of the outskirts of being involved with certain things. So going back to Sarm Studios when we were recording those early mid singles, I used to, because of my love of the studio and being in and around it, when the rest of the band went out to the pub after the recordings, I would stay back and I would just listen to what everybody else has been recorded. And Trevor Horn was doing the Let's Kind of Love in the studio next door. So I would just sneak in and listen to some of the sessions going on. And then when it got late at night and they would start doing stuff with they just acquired a Fairlight computer. And so I would just sit in and help tinker with that and things. And those night sessions became the birth of the Art of Noise. So a great time to be around.
Yeah, I mean, because it was a great time. I mean, I remember seeing Japan, something like £2.50, I think, here in Norwich, Simple Minds, Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
The list just goes on, and it was just
brilliant. Depeche Mode supported us in Leeds and the Amnesia Club back in '81. So
really,
yeah.
Who was telling me? I interviewed someone the other day and they supported them, but I can't remember who it was now.
Yeah. I can remember to this day them arriving and doing the sound check, and they had I was amazed that they had the backing tracks on this cassette recorder. They kind of popped down in the middle of the stage. It was before they did the reel-to-reel stuff. They had it on a cassette.
Right.
That's fascinating. And it was a great time to be around music because there's bands like with Naked Lunch. We did a gig with them and B Movie. There was a lot of bands kind of touring around at the same time as we were doing those early stuff. So there was a small window where we did a lot of gigs, and those bands doing the same kind of circuits, playing the same clubs at the time. So it was good to be around.
Yeah, I remember seeing B Movie. Funny enough. Well, I can't remember. I know I went there. That's about it. Really, I was a bit too young to remember too many of them things. But it's brilliant. It's brilliant. But you really need to get this other stuff, old stuff, back out, don't you?
Yes, definitely, and then get some new stuff going on it. That's the try and get some life out of this stuff behind me. That'll be quite good. But I've still got that kind of draw of that era. I love the sounds and the feel from that era.
But it's the sounds were great. So there's no reason not to go. I mean, I think it's like I was talking to Andy McCluskey once, you know what. No, I was talking to Paul actually about you could listen to one of their new albums and you wouldn't actually know whether it was a new one or an old one.
Yes.
Because the sound has always stayed the same.
Yeah.
And, I forget what Paul said, but he just said, yeah, he said, they're like little time bubbles, you know, and whatever we play, you could be listening to the old or new, and it's all.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I'm great with that because I don't. It's like Gareth. I mean, a lot of us. I can't quite get into his new music like I did with his old music because he's changed his direction slightly. Well, big. It is not really a direction I've really gone in, you know. And I do like a lot of different music, but I just can't quite get.
Yeah, I was never a fan of his kind of more kind of industrial sounding stuff. You know, I mean, as I said before, I absolutely loved the early stuff because you know, after Our Friends Electric and then Cars came out, I kind of went to the back catalogue and looked at all the Tribute Army stuff and got the first album of that and got into that, and I loved the kind of the more kind of punky aspect of that early stuff, and then loved it all up until probably Telecon was the kind of last album that I kind of was in love with, and then after that, when it got to, well, maybe Dance, but I Assassin, no, I didn't. I kind of fell out of love with it, and then he went into this whole kind of, you know, more darker side of things, and I wasn't into that at all.
No, I mean, I Assassin, it was such if you went from the Pleasure Principle, Telecom, to fretless bass and all that sort of stuff, there was such a big change.
Yeah,
I haven't listened to it for years.
Yeah. No, but I love his new stuff though. I mean, I know the Savage. Brilliant album. I love it. It's really, really good. I mean, you know, I think it's a real return to form in terms of very strong songwriting. You can't keep a good song down at the end of the day. If you write a song, it doesn't matter how it's performed or in which genre it's put into. You know, you can mix any song into any genre you like, but if it's a great song, it'll just travel. And those are good songs on there. You know, got to hand it to him. You know, it's when the first single came out from that album, I was sold. Very, very good on it. And I mean, he's so good live, isn't he? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think when I'm 62, I could be bouncing around like that, but I doubt it.
I think his voice has got better.
Yeah, it's different. It's definitely gone different, but he's had a weird career. You know, he was up there, down there, and he's sort of not up there, but he's not far off it. You know what I mean? He's there, isn't he?
I think he's in a very good place now. You know, an enviable place really if you're an artist. You know, it's you haven't got all the kind of trappings of huge success, and by that I mean the trappings of the hanger-oners and the label and the publishers and the management and all the people who feed off you for their existence. So you know, big massive global stars, it must be hell. You know, to be in that world, because you know, I mean, back in the kind of probably 82, we had a tiny glimmer of taste of that, and you're just surrounded by people that say yes to you, and they say yes because they have an ulterior motive, and that's to kind of get a wage, and get a percentage, get a cut, you know, and that's got to be hell to live with. So I think he's in a good place, and he's in charge of his own destiny, which is good to be.
It's great. Well, Mark, it's been brilliant talking to you.
And you, yes, yeah.
And
nice to catch up, and it's good to see kind of you know, I've been kind of looking at some of the ones you've been doing on it. You know, with Couple No Name with Eric and stuff. You know, it's very good. And hopefully you should try and get Rusty Egan on.
Well, yes, I know I should. But I had a bit of a fallout with him when Steve Strange died.
Yeah, the old visage. Yeah.
There's, yeah, I mean, so he might not remember who I am. He might well do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did have
I
a
think
bit.
he's Rusty. Rusty's a great guy, really is, and he's got a heart of gold. He's been hard done by across the years because he's a very trusting character, a very generous character on it. Again, I've got to know him fairly well over the recent years. And when I've been in London and I've had a spare evening and I've just kind of, go out there, anyone's free to do something on an evening. Rusty's got in touch, and he's Siri talking there. Rusty's got in touch and said, I've got some tickets for the Albert Hall. Do you want to come see a gig? And such a generous person. And when he came on the Mature tour, when he came to New York, he played the Mood single as part of his, it was really nice, very generous, and talked about me and stuff like that, so it's great guy. So you should get him on. Yeah.
I think I will actually. It's a strange one because the argument we were having, I'd been to see Visage, and Steve was awful.
Yes.
The guy can't sing.
No.
And as he was standing on the microphone or leaning, the microphone started going down, and he went down with him.
Yeah.
But I must admit, I had a couple of beers, and I sort of tuned into it.
Yeah.
And because I was reviewing at the time for Art Rocker, I had to review it, and I was ringing up friends the next day saying, "How did you find that last night?" Because I thought I enjoyed the night in its madness, and everyone saying, "Yeah, I don't know what, but we all had a good time."
Right. Yeah. And it's difficult. I find that with artists from that era, it's difficult to know when you kind of draw a line with it, because some things go past their shelf life, don't they? And then they shouldn't continue, and that's probably a very good example. And I've been to see quite a number of bands from that era that kind of do the circuit, and you go and see them, you're thinking, well, this the time is to stop, because you're now ruining the kind of the memories of it. It's but there's other bands that are doing really well. I went to see Blancmange last year. Brilliant, really, really good on it. It's there's some good things. I'm John Fox again. Great live, and still doing some great records and new albums. Fantastic. And stuff he's doing with Benj and stuff. And I'm lucky kind of to kind of know all those guys. In that scene that's happening. It's weird. There's a kind of weird climate up here because in my next village, Bill Nelson lives.
No, I was thinking of
I bump into Bill in the local supermarket every catch up chat. So it's great things are still happening, but it's knowing whether not to dwell too much with nostalgia and kind of you move forward. That's the key to move forward. Do something new.
It is, but also I think you can do that, but still move forward. In the same sense, You can still see. I remember talking to Chris Payne years ago, and he hated the polymood because it was always going wrong.
Yeah.
But to me, a polymood was like a naughty little kid, and it was pulsating energy all the time. You could just press one note.
There are some machines that are amazing creatively. I've got some stuff here I've got the new Hydrosynth that just came out, which is an amazing machine. Does a lot of things, and I've got an OB6 and stuff like that. But the Mini Moog is probably the simplest synth out there in terms of but it makes you be creative. It's there's something about its constraints that makes you kind of think, well, I need to try and get something out of this, and and it's I love it. If I had to just have one synth, that would be the one I would have, because it just makes you do things. And I think that's the key. I think the modern world that we have now, and a lot of modern electronic music, when it's done, what they call it in the box, so it's done on the
Yeah.
computer, all soft synths and things. There's too much choice. That you spend half your life just going through different sounds, and there's no creativity comes out of it. You press a button, use a finger, and you get great beats. And I think there's something to be said for having to kind of work hard for something.
Well, exactly. I mean, I said the same thing to Andy McCluskey years ago. Albums or records back then, there was a simplicity of, like, you can have a 8-track, or as he said, well, if you've got a better sound, we've got to take one sound off.
Yes.
Because you've only got 8 tracks. Or I think he said there was a way over it, but
yeah.
Nowadays, especially with Gary, it's so layered. There's so much stuff going on. There's a multitude of different sounds, which is fine.
Yeah.
But sometimes it gets a bit too much. I prefer the simplicity of music, if you see what I'm saying.
I think it is. Yeah, I had a good chat with Martin Ware last year.
Yeah.
And he was saying that although he does a lot of things on soft synths now, he plays by the same rules. So that the soft synths he uses are the virtual versions of the synths he actually used to own, and he writes the same way. So he doesn't use chords. He'll build a chord up with mono lines.
Right.
And so that's fascinating, to have that kind of discipline to say, okay, I've got all these things, in a software form that can just give me everything, but I'm going to constrain myself to only do the way I used to do it. And I think that's brilliant. It's
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's certainly people like Jean-Michel Jarre and Oxygen and Equinox. To be fair, he was playing it all himself, and there's millions and one brilliant sounds, but that's that kind of album, isn't it? Or that record. But anyway, I'm going to have to go because I've just seen a load of people up here.
Yeah. Well, it's been great chatting to you. Really has. Enjoyed it. So, and hopefully we'll, at the end of all this, I'll see you at one of our things that we tend to go to every now and again. Yeah.
We will do, mate. We will do. And thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. It's been my pleasure. All right. Take care. Thank you.
I will. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Nope. I've got to try and end it now.